Princess Zara had never expected to fall in love with someone like David. She met him on the trading ship called Star Runner, where he worked fixing broken machines and keeping everything running smoothly, while other men tried to impress her. With fancy gifts and sweet words about her beauty, David barely looked up from his work when she walked by. The first time they really talked was when she got lost trying to find the ship's library. David was sitting in a corner, eating his lunch alone and reading an old book about distant planets. She asked him for directions, and instead of bowing or calling her Your Highness like everyone else, he just pointed down the hallway and said, "Third door, on the left." That simple moment changed everything for her. Here was someone who saw her as just another person, not a prize to be won or a stepping stone to power. Zara started finding excuses to visit the parts of the ship where David worked. She would ask him about the machines he fixed, pretending to be curious about how things worked. David had gentle hands and a quiet way of explaining things that made even the most complicated repairs sound simple. He never rushed her questions, or made her feel foolish for not knowing about engines and computers. Slowly, their conversations grew longer. David would tell her stories about the different worlds he had visited during his years working on trade ships. He painted pictures with his words about purple sunsets on desert planets and cities that floated among the clouds. Zara found herself looking forward to these talks more than any royal banquet or fancy party she had ever attended. The other crew members started to notice. Some whispered that the princess was spending too much time with a simple repairman. Others thought it was sweet that she had found someone who made her smile so genuinely. Captain Rodriguez, who had known Zara since she was a child, watched with concern but said nothing. He had seen too many political marriages destroy good people. David seemed completely unaware of the attention their friendship was creating. He treated Zara the same, whether they were alone or surrounded by others. When she laughed at his stories, his eyes would light up with genuine happiness. When she looked sad after receiving messages from home about her arranged marriage, he would quietly bring her tea and sit with her until she felt better. The turning point came during a 3-day journey through empty space between star systems. Most passengers stayed in their rooms, but Zara couldn't sleep. She wandered to the observation deck and found David there, staring out at the stars. They sat together in comfortable silence for hours, watching distant suns twinkle like diamonds on black cloth. "Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if you were someone else?" Zara asked softly. David considered this carefully, as he did most questions. "Sometimes," he said, "but then I think about all the things that had to happen exactly right for me to be here, in this moment, talking to you. Maybe being someone else wouldn't be better. Maybe it would just be different." Something in his voice made her heart skip. She realized she didn't want to be anyone else either, not if it meant missing this moment. This connection was someone who understood her in ways no one ever had. Their relationship deepened over the following weeks. They would meet early in the mornings before the ship got busy, sharing breakfast and planning their days. David would show her how to fix simple things, and she would read to him from books she loved. These quiet moments felt more precious to her than all the jewels in her family's treasury. The proposal came unexpectedly. They were in David's small workshop, and she was helping him organize tools while he worked on a particularly stubborn engine part. The repair was going badly, and most people would have been frustrated. But David just kept working patiently, trying different approaches. "You never give up, do you?" she said, admiring his determination. "Not on things that matter," he replied, then stopped working and looked at her directly. "Zara, I know I'm not the kind of man your family expects you to marry. I don't have money, or titles, or political connections. All I have is these 2 hands and a heart that beats faster every time you walk into a room." He reached into his toolbox and pulled out a ring he had made from polished metal scraps. It was simple but beautiful, crafted with the same careful attention he gave to everything he did. "I can't offer you palaces or armies," he continued, "but I can promise that I will love you exactly as you are, not as a princess or a political alliance, but as the woman who makes me want to be better than I am." Zara's answer came without hesitation. She had spent her whole life surrounded by people who wanted something from her. David was the first person who seemed to want nothing except her happiness. When she said yes, she felt like she was finally choosing her own life instead of living the one others had planned for her. The wedding ceremony was small and perfect. Captain Rodriguez agreed to perform the service in the ship's chapel, a tiny room with walls that showed images of passing stars. Zara wore a simple white dress instead of the elaborate gown her mother had chosen for her arranged marriage. David wore his best work clothes, cleaned and pressed until they looked almost formal. The crew gathered to witness their vows, and even the most hardened space travelers wiped away tears when David promised to love Zara in this life and whatever comes after. When they kissed as husband and wife, the stars outside seemed to shine brighter, but their happiness came with a price. Messages from Zara's family grew angry and threatening. Her father, the emperor, declared that she was no longer his daughter. Her mother sent long letters about family duty and disappointment. The Duke of Proxima Centauri, who was supposed to marry her, made public statements about betrayal and revenge. Zara tried to stay strong, but the rejection from her family hurt more than she expected. David held her when she cried and reminded her that they had each other. That was enough, she told herself. Love was supposed to be enough. 6 months of married life had been the happiest time in Zara's life. She and David had settled in a small colony called New Haven, far from the busy trade routes and political drama of the core worlds. Their little house sat on the edge of town, with a view of rolling hills that turned golden in the evening light. David worked at the local power station, keeping the energy systems running for the mining operation that supported the whole community. Every morning, Zara would wake up before sunrise to make breakfast for David before he left for work. She had never cooked before getting married, but Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, had taught her how to make simple meals that tasted like home. David always said her pancakes were better than anything he had eaten on fancy ships, and the way his face lit up when he tasted them made all her burned attempts worth it. In the afternoons, Zara tended their small garden. She grew vegetables and flowers, learning which plants needed more water and which ones preferred shade. Her hands, once soft from royal treatments, now had dirt under the nails and small cuts from thorns. She loved every mark because each one represented something she had built with her own effort. The townspeople had accepted them without asking too many questions. They knew Zara came from money because of her accent and the way she sometimes used formal words. But in a frontier colony, everyone had stories they preferred not to share. What mattered was that David fixed things when they broke, and Zara helped at the community center when children needed extra reading lessons. Their evenings were spent on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. David would tell her about his day at the power station. She would share gossip from the market or news about their neighbors. These simple conversations felt more valuable to her than all the state dinners and diplomatic meetings she had attended as a princess. But their peaceful life shattered on a Tuesday morning when the sky filled with dark chips. Zara was hanging laundry on the line behind their house when she heard the low humming sound. At first she thought it might be thunder from an approaching storm. The sound grew louder and more mechanical, making her look up at the clear blue sky. But what she saw made her drop the wet clothes and run toward the house. 7 massive warships hung in the air above New Haven like metal clouds blocking out the sun. Their hulls were black with red markings that Zara recognized from intelligence reports she had read years ago during her royal education. Krillian raiders, the most feared. Pirates in this sector of space. The first energy blasts hit the town center before anyone could react. The community building where children played after school exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. The market where Zara bought fresh fruit every morning burst into flames. People poured out of their homes, some carrying babies, others helping elderly family members move as fast as they could. David came running from the power station, his work clothes covered in dust from machinery that had shaken apart when the attack began. He grabbed Zara's hand and pulled her toward their house, but she could see in his eyes the same terror she felt in her heart. This wasn't a random raid for supplies or money. The Krillians were being thorough, systematic, like they were looking for something specific. "The cellar," David said, pulling her through their front door. "We can hide there until they move on." But Zara's mind was racing with horrible possibilities. Her family had many enemies, people who would pay well to see her captured or worse. Had someone discovered where she was living? Had her marriage to David put him and everyone in this peaceful colony in danger? Through their kitchen window, she could see Krillian soldiers moving through the streets. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that could cut through steel doors. Some were herding captured colonists toward the landing zones where transport ships waited. Others were searching houses methodically, breaking down doors and checking every room. "David, I think they're here because of me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "My cousin Valdris always said he would make me pay for refusing to marry the Duke if he hired the Krillians to find me, ... David was moving toward their bedroom, but he stopped when he heard the fear in her voice. "Even if that's true, hiding is still our best option. Once they realize you're not easy to find, they'll give up and leave." Heavy footsteps stomped across their front porch. Through the thin walls, they could hear rough voices speaking in the harsh Krillian language. One of them was giving orders, while others spread out to surround the house. These weren't common pirates looking for quick profit. They were professional soldiers following a careful plan. Zara pressed herself against the wall, trying to stay quiet while her heart pounded so loud she was sure the whole neighborhood could hear it. Everything she and David had built together, their simple, happy life, was about to be destroyed because of who she used to be. The front door exploded inward with a crash that shook dust from the ceiling. 3 Krillian soldiers stepped through the opening, their reptilian faces hidden behind dark helmets, their weapons already powered up and ready to fire. Behind them, she could hear more soldiers positioning themselves around the house. Princess Zara of Andoria, one of them called out in accented standard language. "We know you are here. Surrender now, and your husband will not be harmed." David's hand found hers in the darkness of their bedroom doorway. She could feel him trembling, but whether from fear or anger, she couldn't tell. Everything they had worked for, every dream they had shared was crumbling around them. But then David did something that changed everything. Instead of leading her toward the cellar to hide, he walked calmly to their bedroom closet and began moving boxes aside. Zara watched in confusion as he pushed away containers of old books and winter clothes, revealing a hidden space she had never noticed before. From that secret compartment, David pulled out things that made no sense. A sleek silver weapon that hummed with energy when he touched it. Pieces of military armor that looked far too expensive for a simple repair worker to own. Equipment with markings she recognized from elite military units. "David, what is all this?" But even as the words left her mouth, she began to understand something that made her question everything she thought she knew about the man. She had married. The gentle repair worker who made her breakfast every morning was strapping on tactical gear, with movements that spoke of long practice and professional training. His whole posture changed as he checked each piece of equipment. This wasn't the first time he had prepared for battle. Outside their bedroom, the Krillian soldiers were getting impatient. They had stopped calling for surrender and started moving through the house room by room, their heavy boots crushing the small decorative items that had made this place feel like home. Zara realized that her simple life with David had been built on secrets just as much as her royal life had been. But unlike the political lies of her past, these secrets might be the only thing that could save them both. The first Krillian soldier who stepped into their bedroom never saw what hit him. David moved like water flowing around rocks, smooth and unstoppable. The energy blade in his hand came alive with a bright blue glow, cutting through the air with a sound like singing metal. In one perfect motion, he stepped forward and brought the weapon across in an arc that sent the armored raider crashing to the floor. Zara pressed her back against the wall, her mouth open in shock. This wasn't the David she knew, her gentle husband, who spent patient hours teaching her how to fix broken appliances, had just taken down a trained soldier in less than 3 seconds. The way he held the weapon, the precise footwork, the calculating look in his eyes, everything about him had changed. 2 more Krillian raiders rushed through the doorway, their heavy weapons charging up with an angry whine. David didn't hesitate. He rolled to the side as energy blasts scorched the wall where he had been standing, then came up behind their kitchen table. With a casual flick of his wrist, he sent the energy blade spinning through the air like a disk of pure light. The weapon struck the first raider in the chest, cutting through his armor like paper through silk. Before the soldier could even fall, David was already moving again, catching the blade as it returned to his hand and flowing into another attack that left the second raider unconscious on their kitchen floor. The whole fight lasted maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds that destroyed everything Zara thought she knew about the man she had married. "Who are you?" she whispered, staring at David as he calmly checked the fallen soldiers to make sure they wouldn't cause more trouble. David, if that was. Even his real name began going through the raiders' equipment with practiced efficiency. He knew exactly what to look for, which weapons were worth taking, and which pieces of armor would fit him best. His movements were quick and professional, like someone who had done this many times before. David Chen died 3 years ago on a space station called Kepler Point, he said without looking at her. I've been using his name and identity papers ever since. And who are you really? Zara's voice was barely a whisper. He stopped what he was doing and finally met her eyes. For the first time since she had known him, she saw the real person. Behind the gentle smile and quiet manner, his eyes held a sadness that spoke of terrible things he had seen and done, battles he had fought and friends he had lost. Captain Alex Volkov, he said simply. I used to serve with the Terran Elite Guard, 7th Division. We were the ones they sent when regular soldiers couldn't handle the job. Zara felt like the floor was falling away beneath her feet. Elite Guard were legendary throughout the galaxy. They were the best of the best, soldiers who could take on impossible missions and somehow find a way to win. She had heard stories about them during her royal education, tales of small teams who could change the outcome of entire wars. But why are you here? Why were you working as a repairman on a trading ship? Alex finished, strapping on a piece of armor and checked his weapons one more time. Outside, she could hear more Krillian soldiers moving through their neighborhood, calling out orders and searching other houses. They had maybe a few minutes before the next wave arrived. I was discharged. After something called the Siege of Raven's Gate, he explained. Officially, they said I didn't follow orders. Unofficially, I refused to follow an order that would have gotten innocent people hurt. My commanding officer wanted me to destroy a civilian shelter to get to the enemy soldiers hiding behind it. I said no. The pieces began falling into place in Zara's mind. The way Alex always seemed to know when storms were coming before the weather reports. How he could look at a broken machine and immediately understand not just what was wrong, but the 3 different ways to fix it. The careful way he watched crowds when they went to market, always positioning himself where he could see all the exits. You've been hiding, she said. We've both been hiding, he replied. The difference is, I knew what I was running from. More explosions echoed from outside, closer this time. Through their broken front door, I could see smoke rising from buildings throughout New Haven. The Krillians weren't just looking for Zara. Anymore, they were making sure no one would be left alive to tell stories about what had happened here. Alex moved to the window and carefully looked out at the street. His whole body language had changed. Gone was the relaxed posture of a simple working man. Now he moved like a predator, every step calculated, every glance checking for threats and opportunities. There are at least 20 more of them out there, he said. They've got the main roads blocked, and they're moving in a pattern that tells me they know exactly what they're doing. This isn't random violence. It's a military operation. They're here for me, Zara said, guilt crushing down on her chest like a heavy weight. All these people are in danger because someone wants to capture me or worse. Alex turned from the window and walked over to her. For a moment, his expression softened, and she could see a glimpse of the gentle man who had made her breakfast every morning for 6 months, maybe, he said. But I'm not David Chen anymore, and you're not just a runaway princess. We're both something different now. He handed her a small energy weapon, one designed for someone without military training. Do you remember the self-defense lessons your royal tutors gave you? Zara nodded, surprised to find that her hands weren't shaking as much as she expected. Years of royal training had included combat instruction, though she had never imagined she would need to use it. Good. Stay close to me and follow my lead. We're going to fight our way out of this together. Outside, she could hear the Krillian commander barking orders in his harsh language. More soldiers were surrounding their house, and she caught glimpses of heavy weapons being set up to blast through the walls if necessary, Alex checked his equipment one final time, then looked at her with something that might have been pride. "Ready, princess?" For the first time since the attack began, Zara felt a spark of hope. Her husband had been living a lie, just like she had. But maybe, together, they could find a way to turn those lies into something that could save not just themselves, but everyone in New Haven. "Ready, Captain?" she replied. They moved toward the door together, to people who had been pretending to be someone else, finally ready to become who they really were. As Alex prepared his weapons and checked their escape route, Zara knew she had to tell him the complete truth. She had been hiding something just as important as his military past. And if they were going to survive this together, he needed to know exactly what they were up against. "Alex, there's something I haven't told you about who I really am," she said, adjusting the tactical gear he had given her. The armor felt strange against her skin, heavier than the flowing dresses she had worn as a princess, but somehow more. "Honest? You're Princess Zara of Andoria," he replied, scanning the street through their broken window. "Third daughter of Emperor Maximus. Figured that out months ago when I saw how you held your fork and the way you automatically expect people to open doors for you. That's not everything." Zara took a deep breath. "I'm not just any princess. I'm third in line to inherit the galactic throne. When I ran away to marry you, I didn't just embarrass my family, I created a crisis that could tear apart 3 star systems." Alex stopped checking his weapon and turned to look at her completely. For the first time since the attack began, she saw surprise in his eyes. "The galactic throne controls, trade routes, military alliances, and peace treaties across half the known galaxy," she continued. "My older brothers were supposed to inherit, but they both died in that shuttle accident 2 years ago. That left me as the heir, whether I wanted it or not. And your cousin Valdris, he's next in line after me. If something happens to me, he becomes the rightful emperor." Zara felt sick, saying the words out loud. "When I married you and renounced my claim, it should have been simple. But the Galactic Council won't recognize my renunciation because I married someone they consider beneath my station. In their eyes, I'm still the legitimate heir." The pieces clicked together in Alex's military mind. "So Valdris can't legally claim the throne while you're alive and married to me? He needs you. To disappear completely, not just disappear," Zara said quietly. "If I died in some kind of accident, people might ask questions. If I'm captured by pirates and never seen again, it's just another sad story about what happens to people who venture too far from civilization." Outside, the Krillian soldiers were getting organized. They'd stopped their random searching and were now moving in coordinated teams, clearing buildings one by one in a pattern that would eventually lead them back to Alex and Zara's house. Professional soldiers following a professional plan.
"How long have you known?"
Alex asked. "I suspected for months, but I hoped I was wrong. The messages from home, the way certain news stories kept mentioning that I was still missing instead of saying I had renounced my claim. Then 3 weeks ago, I intercepted a communication that mentioned New Haven specifically." Alex processed this information with the same calm efficiency he brought to everything else. "We need to get to the communication center. If we can send a message to the Galactic Council explaining what's really happening here, it might stop this before more people get hurt." They moved carefully through their ruined house, stepping over debris and trying to stay quiet. Through the walls, they could hear their neighbors calling out to each other, some looking for family members, others trying to organize some kind of defense against the raiders. As they reached their back door, Alex suddenly held up his hand for silence. Footsteps were approaching from their garden, heavy boots crushing the vegetables Zara had planted so carefully. She felt a stab of anger at seeing her peaceful life destroyed, but also something else, a feeling she hadn't experienced since leaving the royal court. For the first time in months, she was remembering what it felt like to fight back. The combat. Training she had received as a princess came flooding back. Balance, breathing, awareness of her surroundings, skills she had learned but never expected to use. As Alex opened the door and gestured for her to follow, she found herself moving with a confidence she had almost forgotten she possessed. They made it across 3 backyards before encountering their first patrol. Krillian soldiers were checking the area behind the baker's shop, their weapons ready, but their attention focused on the wrong direction. Alex signaled for Zara to stay low while he circled around behind them. What happened next surprised both of them. Instead of waiting for Alex to handle the threat, Zara found herself moving on instinct. Years of royal combat training took over, and she struck the nearest soldier with a precision that dropped him before he could raise an alarm. The second raider turned toward her, but Alex was already there, finishing what she had started. "Nice work," Alex said, and she could hear genuine admiration in his voice. "I had good teachers," she replied, then realized she was smiling. For the first time since the attack began, she felt like she was doing something, instead of just surviving. They continued toward the communication center, moving through the town like a team that had been working together for years instead of minutes. Alex's military training combined perfectly with Zara's royal education in strategy and tactics. He knew how to move without being seen, and she knew how to read the larger patterns of what the Krillians were trying to accomplish. But as they reached the main street, they encountered something that changed everything. A massive Krillian commander stood in the middle of the road, surrounded by elite soldiers wearing armor that marked them as the most dangerous fighters in the Raider fleet. He was 7 feet tall, with reptilian features and cybernetic enhancements that made him look more like a war machine than a living being. Captain Alexei Volkov, the commander, called out in perfect standard language, "I am Commander Vikmer of the Krillian Third Fleet. I have been hunting you for 3 years." Alex stepped forward, his weapon ready, but not yet raised.
Vikmer,
"I heard you were still angry about what happened at Raven's Gate. You cost me an entire battle group and my promotion to Admiral," the reptilian warrior replied. "The bounty on your head is worth more than most planets." "And Princess Zara," Dekmer continued, turning his attention to her. "Duke Valdris sends his regards, is promised to pay handsomely for proof of your unfortunate demise." Zara felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't just about revenge or money anymore. This was about the future of billions of people across multiple star systems. And it all came down to whether she and Alex could find a way to stop a war before it started. 2 bounties in 1 day, Vekimor said, raising his weapon. Indeed fortunate. The final battle was about to begin, and Zara realized that everything she and Alex had built together, their love, their simple life, their dreams of a peaceful future, would be decided in the next few minutes. But for the first time since the attack began, she wasn't afraid. She was angry, and she was ready to fight for what mattered most. The battle with Commander Dekmer was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. The massive Krillian warrior moved with surprising speed for someone his size, his cybernetic enhancements making him faster and stronger than any normal person. His weapon fired energy blasts that could have melted through steel. His armor seemed to absorb impacts that should have knocked him down. But Alex had been preparing for this fight for 3 years. Every move that Khmer made, Alex seemed to anticipate. When the commander charged forward with his massive blade, Alex rolled to the side and struck at the joints in his armor. When Nekmer tried to corner him against a building, Alex used the wall to launch himself over the alien's head. Zara found herself fighting alongside her husband with a natural rhythm that surprised them both. Her royal training had taught her to read battle situations and find weaknesses in enemy formations, while Alex's military experience showed her how to turn those weaknesses into victories. Together, they were more than either could have been alone. The fight raged through the streets of New Haven, buildings and vehicles becoming weapons and obstacles. Zara used her smaller size to stay mobile, striking quick hits against the Ekmar's armor while Alex kept the commander's attention focused on the main threat. The other Krillian soldiers tried to help their leader, but they found themselves outmatched by 2 people who had finally stopped pretending to be someone else. When Dekmer finally fell, his defeat echoed through the entire Raider fleet. Legendary commander who had terrorized this sector for decades had been brought down by the ghost of Raven's Gate and a princess who fought like a warrior queen. The remaining Krillian soldiers looked at each other with uncertainty, then began retreating toward their ships. But the victory came with a cost. New Haven was in ruins, with many buildings destroyed and innocent people hurt. The peaceful colony where Zara and Alex had built their simple life together was gone forever, replaced by smoking wreckage and painful memories. As they helped the wounded and organized the survivors, Zara and Alex had to face the reality of what came next. The secret of their location had been discovered, and more enemies would come. Duke Valdris wouldn't give up just because one attack had failed, and Alex's past as a military legend meant there would always be people hunting for him. "We can't stay here," Alex said as they worked together to treat injured colonists. "Even if we rebuild, we'll always be looking over our shoulders." "I know," Zara replied, watching the children who had survived the attack help their parents salvage what they could from their destroyed homes. "But I'm tired of running." Over the next several days, as rescue ships arrived and the colony began to recover, Zara and Alex made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. They had spent months hiding from who they really were, but the attack had shown them that running from the truth never solved anything. "I'm going back to the capital," Zara announced to Alex as they sat on the hill, overlooking what was left of New Haven. "Not as a runaway princess, but as someone who's ready to take responsibility for what she was born to do." "The Galactic Council will never accept me as your husband," Alex pointed out. "Discharged soldier with no noble blood and a price on. His head isn't exactly royal consort material, and will change what it means to be royal," Zara said with determination that reminded Alex of the warriors he had served with in the elite guard. "I've learned more about leadership in 6 months of marriage to you than I did in 20 years of palace training." They spent weeks planning their return to civilization. Zara would reclaim her position as heir to the galactic throne, but not as the sheltered princess who had run away to find love. She would return as someone who had lived among common people, who understood what life was like outside the palace walls, and who had proven she could fight for what she believed in. Alex would stand beside her, not as a hidden fugitive, but as her openly acknowledged partner and the commander of her personal guard. His military reputation and tactical expertise would be valuable assets in the political battles ahead, and his loyalty to her had been proven under the most dangerous circumstances possible. The journey back to the capital took them through dozens of star systems, and at each stop, word spread about the princess who had married for love and the soldier who had given up everything to protect her. Some people called them fools for challenging traditions that had existed for centuries. Others saw them as symbols of hope that the future could be different from the past. When they finally reached the imperial capital, they found a galaxy balanced on the edge of civil war. Duke Valdris had been gathering support for his claim too. The throne, arguing that Zara's marriage to a commoner proved she wasn't fit to rule. Several noble houses had chosen sides. Military units were positioning themselves for what might become an all-out conflict. But Zara and Alex had allies they hadn't expected. The common people, the miners and traders and farmers who made up most of the galaxy's population, had heard their story and seen it as proof that the old ways of doing things might finally be changing. When Zara appeared before the Galactic Council to formally claim her inheritance, the halls were packed with ordinary citizens who had never been allowed inside before. "I stand before you not as the princess who ran away," Zara said in her address to the council, "but as someone who has learned what it means to earn respect instead of demanding it. I have worked with my hands, fought beside my husband, and stood with people who judge you by your actions rather than your bloodline." The vote was closer than anyone had expected, but in the end, the council recognized Zara as the legitimate heir. Duke Valdris's conspiracy was exposed, and the threat of civil war began to fade. The galaxy had chosen to move forward rather than backward, to embrace change rather than cling to old fears. Alex stood beside Zara during her coronation ceremony, wearing the uniform of the Imperial Guard rather than the simple work clothes he had worn in New Haven. But when the crown was placed on her head, and she became Empress of half the known galaxy, the first thing she did was take his hand and face the future together. Their love story had begun with both of them pretending to be someone else, but it had grown into something real and strong enough to change the course of history. The alien princess had married a commoner, but together They had become something greater than either could have achieved alone. And in the end, that was enough to change not just their own lives, but the lives of billions of people who had been waiting for leaders who understood that true strength comes not from the crown you wear or the blade you carry, but from the courage to stand with the people you love when the whole galaxy seems to be against you.